So welcome to the Life Illuminated podcast. I'm Maggie Kelly, your host, and today I have the honor and the pleasure of welcoming Nancy Hartwell to the show. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Maggie.
How are you, dear?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, I'm glad to see you and have you also. And I would love for you to share your journey with our listeners. Can you tell us a little bit about what path you're on and what started you down the path of where you are now?
Yeah, well, to my amazement, I have become an internationally recognized authority on human trafficking and the 21st century slave trade, which, by the way, is flourishing. Years ago, I had a beautiful, tall, blonde German friend named Ursula, and one day she simply vanished. They found her bicycle next to the road, and nobody has heard from her or seen her since.
Wow.
Several weeks later, we heard rumors that were probably true that she had been sold to a sultan in Libya. Well, that really spooked me because at this point I was a pretty cute blonde myself, and I kept thinking, holy Toledo, that could have been me.
Yeah.
And I started collecting stories and stories and stories. And once people know you're interested in this topic, you get bombarded with stories. And I noticed that many of them were very similar about how the traffickers operated, the ruses that they used to lure and trap their victims. It was very often the same story, just different players. And so I ended up with hundreds of stories. And when I, quote, retired, unquote, I finally had the time to sit down and write them and turn them into a good read and share them with the world.
So what did you retire from?
Well, that's a complicated question. For most of my life, I've been a writer. I wrote for the Washington Post on Capitol Hill for 7 years. Then I started doing international work. I was a lead proposal writer for an international consulting company, and for 14 years. And they sent me everywhere. I've been to 45 countries, including Mozambique, Bangladesh, Guyana, Bolivia, Haiti, all the garden spots of the world. And then I wanted to fulfill a lifelong dream. I started my own catering company just in time for the recession, when everybody was cutting back on frills like catering. And I lost my shirt. But anyway, sometimes you take a risk and it doesn't work. That's called taking a risk. Anyway, so it was when I closed that business that I sat down and wrote these books that are based on these true stories that I've collected over 45 years.
Well, tell us one of the stories or a couple that really stand out for you so that our audience can get a sense of really how insidious this whole process is.
Okay, well, there's a 11-year-old girl on a bus, okay? And a guy sits down next to her, starts groping her. She gets mad. He gropes her again. So another guy farther back who sees what's going on says, look, buddy, you keep your hands off that kid. And then he grabs the guy, pushes him away, and then he sits down next to her. What just happened here? These idiots were working together. The whole thing was a setup. Did you ever tell your kids not to talk to heroes?
Yeah.
Okay. So then in 30 seconds, guy number 2 can extract all the information he needs. Where is she going? Is somebody going to be there to meet her, etc.? Okay. That's one of the stories that gave me the chills.
Yeah, I'll say. I would give any parent the chills.
Yes. there are predators lurking on the other end of online computer games, pretending to be another 9-year-old. And then when they say, send me a picture of yourself without any clothes on, then you begin to think, maybe that's not another 9-year-old.
Yeah.
Yes. The World Cup finals in 2022 will take place in Qatar on the Persian Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
And the facilities are already under construction with slave labor. They send recruiters to poor countries like Afghanistan, Somalia, promising fabulous jobs. And the guys sign what looks to be like a perfectly legitimate labor contract. They pay for their transportation there. Then when they get there, they take their passports away, tear up the contracts, keep the guys under lock and key, make them work 18-hour days under 130-degree heat. The conditions are so bad, they have been averaging a death a day, and nobody knows.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
So is that something that you are still writing about?
Yes. Yes, I have, in fact, 2 books partway done.
And on these topics still, on the topic of slave labor and also the sex slave industry?
It's impossible to write about this all day long every day. It's just too depressing. So I just came out with a book about football.
That's a bit of a switch.
Bible guide.
What, as a player or as a viewer?
Yeah, well, as a viewer, it's intended for people who didn't grow up eating, breathing, football. I have a lot of friends who were raised overseas, and they find American football to be absolutely puzzling. So this just explains how the game works, and lots of funny stories that I've collected. So anyway, that helps keep me sane.
Yeah, I'll say. What a great idea and a terrific diversion to this heavy topic.
Right. Or either that or I bake brownies. So I can bake more than 100 different flavors of brownies.
Oh my goodness. So tell us, what is it that we need to know as a society or as a global community that would wake us up to these kinds of issues or help us make some kind of a change?
Great question. The important thing to know is that after illegal drugs, human trafficking is the biggest criminal enterprise on the planet. It is a multi-billion-dollar international industry. And the State Department, that is not known for wild guesses, estimates that worldwide there are 30 million people held in slavery.
Wow.
This is 2019. We should have done away with this ages ago, but it's a very lucrative business. And, okay, if my friend Ursula, a tall blonde in her 20s, well, this is prime meat. And a tall blonde can retail for more than $100,000. And as long as somebody is willing to pay prices like that, somebody is going to supply the market.
Right. And we're not talking just about countries other than the US. This is going on right here in our own backyards, isn't it?
Yes. The State Department again estimates there are approximately 200,000 slaves in the United States. Most of them in the agricultural industry or in nail salon, massage parlor type places. These people who cross the border, there are some smugglers called coyotes who will try to get them across the Arizona desert. They have to pay for them to be guided across the desert, but very often they just take them to a slave labor camp, and these poor people, they don't know where they'd even go, even if they could escape, which is very difficult. The Chinese and Vietnamese are also very well organized. They can set up a massage parlor that has a back door right next to a coffee shop and an ice cream parlor in a mall where everybody goes. There are people who are specialized in making the business look totally legitimate to the authorities to get the proper licensing and everything. Others are specialized in, quote, recruiting, unquote. The girls are usually, they sleep in the basement and then go upstairs and go to work and then go back down and sleep in the basement. If they start learning English or making friends, they're immediately transferred somewhere else. They're brainwashed so that they're totally scared of anybody in a uniform. And would you believe, in Canton, Ohio, this became such an issue that police, when they would raid one of the places, would take a Mandarin interpreter with them to reassure the women that, no, we're here to help you, to make your life even more miserable. Because the women were so afraid, they wouldn't say anything. So in Canton, Ohio, I mean, this is everywhere. In fact, Toledo, Ohio, is the headquarters of one of the biggest prostitution rings on the East Coast.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Who would ever know such a thing?
Who knew? Right.
And what is being done? Are our police officers trained in being able to recognize this and being able to stop it somehow, or what's being done?
Well, there are a lot of areas that have interdisciplinary task forces to try to at least decrease the incidence of human trafficking. But the problem is, it's not nationwide. It's this county and this city, and so the trafficker just moved to the next door where it isn't quite as complicated. I was shocked just a few months, I'm in Tampa, just a few months ago, in the county next to Hillsborough County, they arrested more than 200 people involved in child pornography, including teachers, deputy sheriffs, a preacher, a school counselor. I mean, the people you think you can trust. Sometimes people will get a job like that to give them access to potential victims, and be in a position of authority so that the child thinks that whatever they say is okay.
Right. So
we really need a nationwide effort. There are organizations that try very hard to help, like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There's a human trafficking hotline that they can answer a call in any of like a dozen languages. One very effective and very inexpensive technique is to put signs in women's restrooms on the interstate or on main highways. If you are being taken somewhere against your will, call this number now. And they'll have to borrow a phone because usually the trafficker will confiscate their phone. But call this number now. How much does it cost to print up, a couple hundred signs like that and put them in the women's restrooms? I mean, this is
a simple idea.
Very simple. Yeah.
I've actually seen that sign on a pole near the local, like, little railway system we have here in San Diego, the coaster. I've
Uh-huh.
actually seen that very sign.
Good.
When about 3 months ago,
Uh-huh.
and it's right there and in more than one language. That's
Good.
exactly what it says.
I've seen billboards too.
Yeah.
For instance, in the Atlanta airport, they have big signs up, in multiple locations,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with a hotline to call. Uh, Bus stations, train stations. These are important places because it's where runaways will go, and runaways have a target on them the size of Texas, and traffickers can spot them at 50 paces, and they know all the buttons to push to make sure that the kid trusts them, and will think, oh, finally a hot meal, a safe place to sleep. And then after a few days, okay, sweetheart, now you owe me big time. And then they move in for the kill.
Right. So tell me, gosh, it sounds like you've spent your entire lifetime in this arena with a couple little side notes of football and brownies, right?
Right.
all because really the seed was planted through Ursula, right?
Yes. And I think about her every single day, wondering what kind of life she must have had. I, I hope this isn't a pervert, or, um, it just really turns my stomach to think about it. And some of these sheikhs and princes on the Gulf have so much money, they don't know what to do with it. So they'll have a harem with 500-600 women, and half the time the girls don't even meet the man who, quote, owns them, unquote. Or if they do, they see maybe once every year or two. I mean, but they're prisoners. They can't go anywhere. They can't talk to anybody. There's no internet. There's no telephones. The walls are 12 feet high, and there are armed guards at the gate. You're stuck.
Yeah. Well, your passion sure shines through, and it's clear that this has been a life passion. And looking back on how far you've come with this whole topic, what kind of obstacles or internal fears did you have to overcome to actually take this on?
Well, I mean, it just kind of rocked my world, and I started really thinking about this. I mean, belonging to somebody else is a scary thought, and this person has total life and death control over you. If one of the characters in my flagship book, Harem Slave, is a necrophiliac, and he will have slaves put to death so that he can play with their cadavers.
Dear God.
Yeah, and I actually read about a prince in Saudi Arabia who was a necrophiliac, and the royal family was so embarrassed that they excluded him from any possibility of succession. He was not one of the crown princes, or he was pretty far down on the list anyway, but just to make sure, they excluded him from any possibility of succession. But there are people like that out there, and it's the weirdos who buy girls so that they can do whatever they want. And that scares me even more. It took me 20 years to write these books. I mean, I started out with a draft of Harem Slave probably in 1986.
Wow.
And it finally came out in 2013.
Why is that? Just because you were gathering more material, or just the topic was heavy, or?
I wanted it to be perfect. I put that book through 107 drafts.
Wow.
And it's the best thing I've ever written, and I've been writing my whole life. I published a poem in a nationwide magazine when I was 8, and another one when I was 9. So I've been writing a long time, but it just meant so much to me. I just had to show the horror, bring it alive, and somehow not write pornography. I mean, the life of a sex slave, you have to say certain things out loud. But I tried to do it with reasonably good taste. But that's a very hard tightrope to walk.
Yes. Well, it's a very difficult topic.
It's an explosive topic, and I tried to be almost matter of fact about it, to emphasize the horror. I didn't want to dramatize things and make them not believable. Neither did I want to minimize them, to just skate over the surface, because people wouldn't understand how horrible it is. So that was a real tough
line to walk. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. I can see how that would be. So it sounds to me like Ursula has been your greatest role model in your life.
Well, in a number of ways, yes, because she's she's the victim of this horrible crime. It's not like they steal your wallet that messes you up for a few weeks. They steal you. They steal your dreams. They steal your future. They steal you away from all your friends and your family and everything that you've ever known. And I just think that's inexcusable.
Oh, I everyone listening would agree, I'm sure. And your passion is palpable, really. Where can people learn more about you, Nancy?
Well, I have a website, nancyhartwell.com, and on the website there's actually a 5-part course about modern day slavery and all the different forms that it takes and the different names that it assumes, along with how traffickers typically operate, and tips also for parents so that they can protect their kids. All you have to do is go to nancyhartwell.com and click on it. I also send out a newsletter every now and then. All I need is your email address, and I'll add you to the newsletter list. There are, in most places, there are organizations, many of them faith-based, that fight this crime and help the victims. They are always looking for financial support. They are always looking for volunteers. And if you could see it in your heart to contribute to one of these organizations, either financially or volunteering some time, they would appreciate it very much. Like the Salvation Army usually has a shelter for girls that have been picked up off the street. There are other organizations that do try to help. Here in Tampa, it's one called the Porch Light, that's always on. So they would appreciate your help so much. Also, if you become really interested in it, you can give presentations at like Kiwanis Club or Methodist Men or other organizations, civic organizations, and be specific about what's going on in your own community about it. And you can read my books. It's a quick course on human trafficking, particularly the slave trade on the Persian Gulf. That's where That's where a lot of it is centered. And China and India, Southeast Asia, um, if if you have seafood in your freezer from Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, or Thailand, there's about an 80% chance that it involves slave labor. In India, there's something called debt slavery. Let's say you want to get married and you don't have any money. So you borrow $500 from somebody and you agree that you'll work for him for a year to pay back the money. Well, what he forgot to tell you is that you have to buy your food from him. And so you keep getting further and further and further in debt. And that $500, you're still working it off 25 years later. All kinds of tricks like that. So there is
I'm sorry.
That course, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so what is the one piece of advice that you would give to anyone listening to help them live a life illuminated today?
Pray like you mean it. Parents, please protect your children. Monitor your kids' social media sites. Monitor what they're doing on the internet. Like I mentioned before, there are predators out there pretending to be other kids. Have a family password. Very often, pedophiles will go to an elementary school when it's letting out, and they'll find a child with something personalized, like a baby cap or a book bag. Oh, Julie, hi. My name is Frank. Look, your mom couldn't make it to pick you up today, so she sent me. This is a very common ploy. So if Julie says, okay, Frank, what's the password? And he doesn't know it, then she knows not to leave with him. Okay? Another very simple technique, but it works. So do have a family password.
That's great. Well, Nancy, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you a little bit better and just hearing about the intense passion you have about this topic. It's you know, I, for one, as a member of global society, am thrilled that there's someone like you who has the kind of passion that you do for this topic. And I appreciate everything you've done. And I actually look very much forward to reading your book.
Yeah, well, it's actually a series of 3. The flagship book is called Harem Slave. Then there's a sequel called Prince Ibrahim's Favorite. And then a companion volume to that called Voices from the Harem. It's not really a novel, but it's 111 individual stories about how each of these girls was betrayed, kidnapped, and enslaved, and how they're dealing with it. Some of them have gone completely insane. A couple of them are actually in love with Ibrahim. Some of the others are planning to murder him.
It runs the gamut. Wow. I can't even imagine the psychological toll on these women.
Yeah, I mean, and once they hit like 25 or 30, then they're not, prime meat anymore. So then they're relegated to somewhere lower on the food chain, like an S&M brothel, or some of these places are so brutal. Life expectancy is calculated in weeks.
Oh,
yes,
my.
Yes. Or they're sold to somebody like Ibrahim, who might have them put to death so he can play with their dead body.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Well, again, I appreciate, just one of the world's citizens here, appreciate very much that there's someone like you with the passion and dedication and devotion to this topic, and trying to see through your writing and your activism, how we can all make a difference in this topic.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for helping me get the word out. I'm obviously not doing nearly enough because things keep getting worse, but I'm not about ready to give up.
It sure sounds like you're not, and you're a wonderful, strong voice for the topic. So don't stop. And hopefully there's someone listening to the Life Illuminated podcast today that might even be able to connect with you and further your cause.
That would be wonderful.
Well, thank you again, Nancy. It was wonderful chatting with you.
Okay. Thank you, Maggie.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
All right. Are you still there?
I'm there.
Oh, nice. I don't see you on video though, but
I'm there.